Story 1. I haven't really quit. I'm in the 10th year of waiting for my next smoke. Story 2. I had the flu and tried to smoke. I nearly coughed up a lung. I quit that day, cold turkey, and have been smoke-free for 10 years. Story 3. I smoked for 30 years, 50 cigarettes a day. I tried everything many times. In the end, I put the nearly empty pack of cigarettes down and walked away. It was not easy. I had physical withdrawal symptoms for a few weeks, but I got through it. That was nearly 11 years ago, and I have not had one since. Story 4. I started vaping when it was briefly advertised as a less harmful alternative. When vaping became expensive and pretentious, I switched to ZYN nicotine pouches to quit, and now I am addicted to them. Story 5. I stopped buying cigarettes. That may sound flippant, but it is true. The gas station where I used to buy them had only a handful of employees, and I asked each of them individually not to sell cigarettes to me. I never had to test that. This is how I quit. Story 6. Sunflower seeds replaced the hand-to-mouth motion when I had the urge to smoke. Eventually, I stopped eating them. Story 7. I left my job teaching high school and got divorced. With stress reduced by 90%, it became easy to move on. Story 8. The Easy Way to Stop Smoking. Book by Alan Carr that many people recommend. It is somewhat like brainwashing and intentionally repetitive. It repeats a few key points that I needed to hear. I smoked a pack a day for 20 years and quit cold turkey with help from that book. Story 9. Easy Way to Quit Smoking by Alan Carr. It is an easy read. You have to finish it and push through, and it works. There are no withdrawal symptoms. There is no reason to stop spending time with friends who smoke. It is easy to find online for free in portable document format. Story 10. Hard Stop. I had precancerous lung scarring. The doctor pointed at the x-rays and explained this was not a slope. I was one cigarette away from triggering cancer that would kill me, so it was a pretty cut and dried decision. Story 11. I had to be truly sick of smoking before I could quit. I tried several times and failed because I still wanted to smoke. When I finally became fed up, I quit. I switched from smoking to vaping first, and then I stopped vaping. Story 12. Vaping. I haven't gotten to quitting that yet. But it is not the mountain that quitting smoking is. I feel halfway there. Story 13. My personal choice is 1 month without happy green trees to reset my lungs. Story 14. I switched to vaping a couple of years after they first appeared and have continued for about 10 years. My lung health appeared to improve quickly. I became less out of breath. However, I have found vaping to be more addictive and cannot personally recommend it for that reason. I suggest trying patches, lozenges, sprays, or inhalers if you feel unable to stop abruptly. Story 15. I quit cold turkey. I had been doing it consistently for 3 years, and then one day I just stopped. I eliminated every physical way I could get one. Story 16. I used a vape for a year before nicotine restrictions. I mixed my own vape liquid from propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, nicotine, and flavoring. Every time I made a batch, usually every 1 to 2 months, I have the nicotine content. When the nicotine level became very low, I stopped adding it. For the final 3 months, the liquid contained only the base and flavoring, with no nicotine. After 3 months of that, I realized I no longer needed nicotine. I put the vape away and have not smoked for 10 years. Story 17. I quit using ZYNS because they made me feel awful. Story 18. You can try vaping and gradually reduce nicotine levels, but you will still have the oral fixation. Nicotine tablets are also available as an alternative. They worked for me. Story 19. It was easy. I became too broke to afford the habit. Joking aside, a good way to quit is to not buy cigarettes or keep them near you. Chewing gum helps. I also played a lot of games on my phone during the first month to keep my fingers busy. If you are afraid of quitting cold turkey, try scaling back. Even small steps are progress. Good luck, original poster. You can do it. Story 20. I stopped smoking on July 1st, 2023, after smoking since about 1993, when I was 11. I switched to a vape. I know it is not ideal, but it is better than smoking cigarettes. I have not had a puff of an actual cigarette since that day. This is harm reduction. Story 21. I realized that more than half of all potential partners were non-smokers who wouldn't want to have anything to do with a smoker. I didn't want to be the stinky uncle. I had tried multiple times before and I hated the power it had over me. I completed military service in California, moved to the Midwest, and had the wisdom to leave smoking behind. Smoking is about cues. The potted plant outside your front door, the McDonald's you drive by on your way home, and the picture across from your toilet all trigger the urge for a cigarette. If you move, leave it behind. Story 22. I set a target of 8 days without nicotine and went cold turkey, using sleep aids to sleep for long periods. After a few days, it was not so bad. I figured it did not matter if I was awake while the nicotine flushed from my system, and sleeping helped the time pass. Story 23. I quit cold turkey and stuck with it. When you want to quit, you quit. Story 24. 5 years ago, the man who worked next to me had a son 3 days before my son was born in the same hospital. A year and a half ago, he died suddenly from a massive heart attack. I knew I did not want my son to grow up without a father, as his son does now. I have not touched one since. Story 25. I quit drinking because I was broke. I only smoked when I drank. Now I'm not broke and I'm drinking again, but I'm not smoking. I don't miss it. Story 26. I got stuck in an airport for 48 hours with no cigarettes. Laughing out loud, I just let it ride. It has been 7 years. Story 27. I'm trying to quit right now. I'm down to 3 a day and hope to have none soon. Story 28. I tried everything. The doctor told me I was going to die from something else. Quit on day 1. Feels great now after 6 months of hacking up phlegm. I was bedridden using the trash can beside me. That was the worst. Now a cigarette smells terrible to me. Story 29. I use nicotine gum and I vape. I mostly vape 0 mg or 3 mg e-cigarette liquid. I did not set out to quit. The only other time I abstained was when I was forced to in rehabilitation, and this method is going much better. Story 30. I was confined to a hospital for more than 6 months, and was then transferred to a physical rehabilitation facility. Story 31. I started vaping instead and was able to gradually reduce the nicotine levels in the e-liquid I used. When I quit vaping, it was 10 times easier than my previous attempts to quit cigarettes. Story 32. I set a date. My daughter's 5th birthday. Her dad took her to Disneyland for a week, so I figured it would be a good time when she wouldn't see me acting crazy. I prepared myself mentally in advance, acknowledging that the 3rd day feels like an acid trip and that it takes 21 days to make or break a habit. I rewarded myself with a Snickers bar every day. I allowed myself a year before trying anything else difficult, such as weight loss, and I allowed myself to gain weight during that year. I gained about 5 pounds. I lost it and have kept it off through exercise and mostly healthy eating. It has been 29 years. Story 33. I'm curious. How did you ever start? What exactly did you find attractive about those smelly fire sticks that make your breath and clothing reek? Story 34. I declared war. I used every weapon I had available. The pill, the patch, and occasionally smoking joints that at first had a pinch of tobacco and later had none. I also used a vape with no nicotine in social situations when I would normally smoke. The vape was just something to do. Then I methodically reduced my nicotine intake by cutting a little piece off the patch each day until it was tiny. I won the war and lived happily ever after. Story 35. I vaped while steadily decreasing my nicotine intake. This was 10 years ago, so I have no idea what the vaping world is like now. I went on a date. She needed more vape juice, so I went with her. The vape store manager was my ex-girlfriend. Later that night, she sold me her old vape pen. I started filling tanks and ordering juices from Mount Baker Vapor. I lowered the nicotine but needed more throat hit, so I upgraded devices until I had a large cloud-producing machine. I was only at 0 to 4 milligrams nicotine then. About a year later, I forgot to bring it to work, and that was it. Story 36. I would recommend starting by tapering, working gradually down to lower doses, and then quitting. Story 37. I am currently using a vape and gradually reducing the nicotine level. I am now at 4 milligrams. I know it will be very difficult to quit completely. About a week ago, I lost my main device and left my old devices at work. On my way home, I bought a cigarillo. I could only take a few puffs at a time, and the fact that I could not go a few hours without wanting another puff was concerning. Story 38. I slowly reduced cigarettes and replaced them with vaping, then switched to zero nicotine vaping. Now I barely vape. Story 39. I switched from traditional cigarettes to vaping, then slowly reduced the nicotine level to zero. Took me more than a year, but I have been smoke-free since then. Story 40. I started vaping, laughing out loud. I traded one addiction for another. I'm gonna switch to unflavored vapes when I'm ready to be serious about quitting, and then I'll stop vaping completely. Story 41. I had chest pain and an inability to breathe for several days. In retrospect, it was likely a very early case of coronavirus disease, but I thought I had passed a point of no return after 12 years of smoking a pack a day. I was so scared I sobbed alone in the bathroom and promised myself I was worth quitting for. I still have cravings 5 years later, but life is much better. Story 42. Actually, I did it the other day because honestly I can't even afford that pleasure anymore. Story 43. I psyched myself out. Every night before I went to sleep, I told myself they were gross and tasted bad. After about a week, I dreamed I lit up and said, ugh. I have not smoked since. Story 44. Stop buying packs. Don't become the annoying friend who always bums cigarettes. Learn to dislike that behavior. Story 45. My first quit attempt, I used nicotine gum. The second time I used a JUL e-cigarette and then quit it. It was much easier than quitting cigarettes, which is why I have mixed feelings about regulations on JUL. Story 46. Wellbutrin, nicotine replacement therapy, and an electronic cigarette. Story 47. I switched to vaping. I vape a lot, and I know it is probably not good, but I feel better than when I smoked 1 to 2 packs a day for about 14 years. It was not easy. I tried to quit vaping at least 7 or 8 times before it finally worked about a year and a half ago. Story 48. I trained myself to find the smell, the taste, and being near it repulsive. Stopping drinking only made it easier. Story 49. The trick was getting sick of every aspect of smoking. I consigned myself to snacks whenever I wanted a cigarette and told myself, fat is better than dead. It was probably terrible advice, but it worked for me. I am preternaturally skinny. Story 50. I switched to vaping. Because I have a child, I still go outside. I no longer felt I had to finish a cigarette. 1 or 2 puffs would satisfy my craving, and I would go back inside to escape the cold. My tolerance decreased, so when I went on vacation, I did not bring the vape. Story 51. I smoked for 27 years. Every night for about 6 months, I would lie in bed and feel my body. I noticed shortness of breath and my heart beating faster than it should. I could smell the cloud around me from the last cigarette of the night. I thought about how much money I was spending. Over 27 years, I spent almost $250,000. I told myself that I would wake up a non-smoker. I did not worry about whether it was true or get down on myself. I simply believed it in that moment. Over time, I began smoking less and less until one day I did not go to get more. I woke up the next morning and used a vape with decreasing amounts of nicotine until I reached zero nicotine for about a month. Then I stopped. I quit on May 12, 2018. I will never smoke again. You can do this. Just believe and be patient. Story 52. I switched to vaping and lowered my nicotine levels over the course of 2 years. I remained nicotine-free for about a year. I weaned myself off by leaving my vaporizer in increasingly inconvenient places until I did not want to get up to retrieve it. I smoked about a pack of Camel Wides a day when I started. Story 53. I used to smoke cigarettes and then I tried vaping. After 2 months of vaping, I tried a cigarette again. After a single puff, I felt a really bad, disgusting sensation I had never felt while smoking, so I quit that day. Later, I used a vape with a burned coil which caused another unpleasant reaction, and I stopped vaping as well. Story 54. It took 3 children, But when my third was born, I basically gave myself a kick up the ass to stop. I moved to vaping instead and have been on 5 milligram and 3 milligram vape juice for about 2 years now. I'm slowly reducing how much I use, so, for example, I have stopped using it at home but still use it at work. I don't recommend having children as a means to make yourself quit though. Story 55. It has been 30 years since my last cigarette. It was also my first. It is easy to quit if you hate the taste. Story 56. I started by switching to light and slim cigarettes, but honestly coronavirus disease 2019 was the most valuable player in making me stop. Story 57. One visit to an acupuncturist ended my 28-year smoking habit. I have not smoked since 2010. Story 58. Yes, I used Chantix to quit as well. It has been about 8 years now. Story 59. I went from smoking to nicotine lozenges. Years later, I quit by using gum and refusing to spend more money on cigarettes. I chewed a pack of gum a day. Story 60. At first, it is hard to quit. You have to quit slowly so your body can adapt. Story 61. Honestly, I just stopped. I had been smoking since I was 12 or 13. One day, right before I turned 21, I realized it was making me sick, and I never smoked again. Story 62. I went from smoking a pack a day. I told myself I would keep busy by going to the gym as I had before. I gained 25 pounds in 3 months and found myself eating more. Story 63. My partner insisted. He was kind and supportive while I took a few weeks to get it all out of my system. He was even supportive when I gained weight and helped me lose it. He was a wonderful man. Story 64. My colon exploded, and I had to spend 2 weeks in the hospital. Story 65. I bought a carton of cigarettes and told myself they were there if I wanted them, then went minute by minute without smoking them. Story 66. I quit cold turkey. I rode my bike to work 20 miles every day and used to smoke a cigarette before work. That was dumb. Story 67. Cigarettes to Juul to a weaker Juul to a salt nicotine pod-based vape with the worst tasting juice I could find. Over a few months, I mixed the juice with a 0% nicotine base, so eventually I was vaping no nicotine. Then I stopped. Story 68. I went through hundreds of lollipops, used a patch for 4 to 5 weeks, and then relied on self-control. It's been 4 years, and maybe twice a year I borrow a cigarette from a friend. After so long, every time it tastes terrible and I realize how badly I smelled every day. Story 69. I hated the smell of cigarettes. I decided to start vaping so I would not smell like smoke and could still get a nicotine fix. Eventually, I began to monitor my nicotine intake with the vape and started to reduce it. I also wanted to stop spending money, so I used nicotine patches. I tried patches twice. I gave up the first time, but on the second attempt I quit completely and have never looked back. Story 70. I quit cold turkey. I used cough drops and gum. I gave up drinking for a while to avoid falling off the wagon. Story 71. I kept an unopened pack with me. When I had the urge, I told myself to wait until later. I did that for a few weeks and it worked. Took determination and willpower. I have been free for 30 years. Story 72. One morning I lit a cigarette and smoked it in bed before I got up. I was disgusted with myself and never smoked again. I think when you are ready and you quit for yourself, it's easy. Story 73. Use regular nicotine gum and nicotine patches. After 2 weeks, cut the patches in half. Stop wearing the patch. Keep chewing gum as long as you need. Story 74. I tried bupropion, brand name Wellbutrin, and a prescription nicotine inhaler. The bupropion helped with cravings, but an unfortunate side effect that I was not warned about is that it can trigger mania or hypomania in certain people. That was borderline traumatizing, so I had to stop taking it. The nicotine inhaler was great. I liked it better than a patch or gum because it helped replace the oral habit. Story 75. I had pneumonia twice in 1 year. I quit smoking and never looked back. 14 years smoke-free. Story 76. Cigarettes became fire-safe. I was already at the point where I wanted to quit, and that change was enough to make me so grossed out by them that I stopped. Story 77. One benefit of the early coronavirus disease 2019 was that it was so new and scary it made me realize smoking was going to kill me possibly soon. I wanted to maximize my chance of living. At the same time, I read Alan Carr's book. I disliked many parts but read the whole thing and can attest that it helped. I behaved poorly for about 6 months before I truly got over it, and I have not wanted to smoke since. It has been nearly 6 years, I believe. My wife still smokes, and that has not made quitting more difficult. Once you make that personal decision, you are truly done. Being around smoking should not make much difference. Story 78. I have an audiobook by a man named Alan something. I can't remember. Story 79. I quit cold turkey. I realized I had stopped more than I intended, but I was no longer a smoker. Story 80. Cold turkey is the way to go. I stopped coffee and red meat for the first couple of weeks. One trick I recommend is buying cranberry juice. Whenever you have a craving, drink a glass. It immediately kills the craving. Story 81. I thought to myself, hey, this is kind of dumb. I don't think I want to do it anymore. So I never bought any more. Story 82. I got really sick with pneumonia, and smoking did not feel as good. I realized breathing was more important than a nicotine fix. I switched from heavy menthols to Marlboro Ultra Lights and kept them nearby so I felt I had an option. It was a mental thing. I also have a non-nicotine vape that I rarely use for the fixation. I caved a few times and smoked those super light cigarettes here and there. I had one today but had not smoked all week. What works for someone else may not work for you. You have to be ready. The first 10 days are the hardest, and after that the intense cravings slow down. It feels great to break the habit of needing a cigarette after every activity. If quitting cold turkey does not work for you, try this method. I smoked for 30 years and smoked a lot. If I can do it, so can you. Story 83. I was a 20-year smoker. I had a baby and got tired of smelling like cigarettes and of washing my mouth and hands before picking up the baby. It has been 2.5 years. The first couple of weeks were hell. Story 84. I ate more beans and was too busy laughing at my gas. For days later, I forgot about smoking. Story 85. I drank a bottle of tequila and was sick for a couple of days. I do not recommend this method, but it worked for me. Story 86. It is not ideal, but I kind of replaced smoking with eating. I have been nicotine-free for almost a year, but I have gained a lot of weight. Now I am going to get in shape. Story 87. I started vaping instead, and I am about 95% sure that it is worse. Story 88. I smoked 2 packs a day and kept getting bronchitis. After a few episodes, I realized this was stupid, so I quit. Story 89. I read the book The Easy Way. Some pseudoscience, but also some legitimate concepts. I gave it to a friend. He quit, passed it on, and the next man in line quit as well. I cannot describe how much I hate the smell now. I get into an elevator and can tell if I beat that man on the 3rd floor into the office. I cannot believe I used to smell so awful. Story 90. An app called Smoke Free. Gamifying quitting is what finally did it for me. Story 91. I quit smoking by using the patch and gum combination and treating it like a project. I smoked a pack a day for years and tried quitting cold turkey several times. I always failed because the cravings were intense and I would end up smoking just one cigarette, which always turned into a full pack. Story 92. I visited the museum exhibit Body Worlds and saw lungs from a non-smoker and a heavy smoker. I then stopped buying cigarettes, and whenever I had a craving I would try to picture what I had seen in the museum. Story 93. Chantix took me 3 months in 2007, after I had smoked 3 packs a day for years. Story 94. I read the book by Alan Carr, The Easy Way to Quit Smoking. I tried to quit and found it very hard. To cope, I would wait until the craving was as strong as I could bear, then take a few puffs of a cigarette, put it out, and wait until the craving returned, repeating the process. That way, I reduced the chemical addiction while maintaining the routine. It took about 2 or 3 weeks to go from half a pack to none. Story 95. I kept a nugget in the front pocket of my button-up t-shirt. Every time I wanted to smoke, I smelled it, and that was enough for me. Story 96. I used nicotine lozenges. but I stayed on them too long. I smoked 2 packs a day for 40 years. This year I will be 13 years nicotine-free. I have saved tens of thousands of dollars and improved my health. Story 97. I opened my front door after smoking 2 cigarettes, then passed out and face planted on the floor. I broke my nose and completely bit through my bottom lip. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance and received stitches on both the inside and outside of my lip. I then had an anxiety attack and was transported to the Veterans Affairs Hospital for further monitoring. I stopped smoking cold turkey after that. Story 98. I started playing Magic: The Gathering. I opened a booster pack every time I wanted to smoke. Now I am too broke to buy cigarettes. Story 99. I used patches and medicines. I also used wooden kitchen matches for oral needs and would light one to smell the burning scent if temptation became too strong. Story 100. I read how to quit smoking the easy way and applied it. Spoiler alert, there is no easy way. Story 101. I looked into my newborn's eyes and knew I had to quit. It has been 8 years now. Story 102. A friend of mine accidentally gave me a moldy cigarette and it made me so sick that I have not smoked since. Story 103. I saw how it significantly shortened my father's lifespan, and I wanted none of that. Story 104. Nuclear option. I was stranded during Helene and could not get any. I went cold turkey and never looked back. Making a religious joke here, so no offense. If God could not get me with a category 4, I am not going down due to self-inflicted health issues. I am 24, by the way. Story 105. Lucid dreaming may sound strange, but I trained myself to lucid dream because my sleep was severely disordered and I had intense nightmares my whole life. I smoked for 23 years and tried everything. Patches, gum, vapes, that popular book, meditation, nothing worked. I created a dream that was a magical quest with a MacGuffin that would cure me of smoking. A potion in a wizard's tower. I climbed the tower, drank the potion, woke up, and from the first moment smoking was unimaginable. It's been 11 years, and I have not had anything resembling a craving. I started smoking when I was 12. The dream was the only thing that worked. Story 106. I realized how much I was paying for them, so I put them down and never picked them up again. Story 107. I was already attempting to wean down using early generation vapes. I got a terrible cold while using half the nicotine from my starting level. The vaping made me feel suicidal. I have not gone back. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, call your local emergency number. If you are in the United States, call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, contact your local emergency services or a crisis helpline. I can help you find local support or resources if you want. Story 108. I was too lazy to drive to the store in the snow, and I have not touched one since. I have no desire to do it again. It has been over 10 years. Story 109. Just put it out. I had to view my father-in-law's house after he burned it down by dropping a lit cigarette. The smell was horrendous. Story 110. I stopped. I was sick of being addicted to anything in order to function. The first 3 days were rough, but it does get easier. It's all in your head, and you are stronger than you think. Story 111. Cigarettes, then vaping, then gum, then patches, then the birth of my daughter. I have been nicotine-free for more than 9 years. Story 112. I took up knitting and crocheting again after not doing either for several years. I had tried quitting several times before, using nicotine gum, patches, and other aids, but keeping my hands and mind occupied helped a lot. It also helped that yarn is usually more affordable than a pack of cigarettes. What finally made me quit for good was that my 2 pet rats at the time would not let me near them if I had just come into the apartment after smoking. They have long since passed away, but I still do not smoke because of them. Story 113. I stopped cold turkey. Took a few rough weeks, but eventually the cravings faded. Story 114. A woman I had a crush on wouldn't date men who smoke, so I quit to impress her. Story 115. I do not smoke, but I quit vaping cold turkey because I was losing the ability to sing. The first time I quit lasted 9 to 10 months. The second time has lasted 11 months and counting, and I hope it is permanent. I would say I have regained about 85% of my vocal ability. Much of the recovery involved learning to accept that my cravings are not going away. But they do pass, they will not kill me, and with time they occur less often. Nicotine is terrible, and I will unfortunately remain someone with a crippling nicotine addiction for the rest of my life, but I can also be stronger than my cravings and choose to let them pass every day and have more good days than I otherwise would. Story 116. Cold turkey after months of buying packs and throwing them away. Story 117. I became very ill and decided I did not want to feel awful anymore. Story 118. I'm not sure this will be super helpful, but it's true. I did it. I reached a point where I was tired of smelling like cigarettes and constantly needing one. Every time I smoked, I felt terrible instead of better. So I stopped. I made a firm decision, and I have not looked back. I have been cigarette-free for over 9 months. Story 119. I convinced myself over 40 years ago that cigarettes tasted awful and that they were a stupid habit. Story 120. I developed severe acid reflux and had to stop to help my chest and lungs feel better. Story 121. I have asthma, fairly severe. I own a nebulizer and take multiple medications to control it and my allergies. I smoked for almost 30 years. I kept feeling terrible and wheezy and noticed how strange my body felt after smoking. I realized I was making myself sick. I became embarrassed to smoke in public and judged myself each time, noting how foolish I looked. It took about 5 months, but I quit and have never looked back. I cannot stand being around smoke. It smells awful and lingers on people. My asthma is still present but controlled. I no longer use my inhaler every day or even every week. Who knew? Laughing out loud. Story 122. I quit cold turkey. It was too expensive and my lungs were useless. I recently reached 5 years clean, and I still crave it every day. I'm still broke, but my clothes smell better and I can jog for more than a minute without feeling like I'm dying. A part of that is that I also started exercising along the way. Story 123. Back in 2000, I was pregnant with my first child. I did not want to smoke during my pregnancy, so I changed the habit. Years later, during the pandemic, that change paid off. I had already replaced smoking with washing my hands. Story 124. I tapered Nicorette lozenges down to mint lifesavers candy. When the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic began, it seemed like a good time. Story 125. I started by smoking cigars, moved to chewing tobacco, and later used crack. I am 100% tobacco-free. Story 126. I quit cold turkey. It took about 2 weeks before I started waking up, and my first thought was not about a cigarette. Story 127. Take a draw, then blow the smoke through a tissue or paper towel. Observe how much tar is in a single draw and imagine how much of that remains in your lungs after years of smoking. That was enough for me to realize how extremely foolish it was, so I stopped immediately. Story 128. I had a severe panic attack for the first time and thought it was my heart or my lungs. I did not smoke for a few days because of anxiety. After realizing what it actually was, I told myself I might as well stop now since I had already been clean for several days. Story 129. I was on Chantix for a while and cut down from a pack a day to about half a pack. Then it got really cold that winter and I didn't want to smoke inside. Story 130. I contracted coronavirus disease 2019. Honestly, the easiest way to quit smoking is to become seriously ill. The worst withdrawal symptoms will blend in with the illness. Story 131. I finally realized I was wasting my money and ruining my skin. Also, you choose to smell like shit. Story 132. I got so mad I could not use my emergency savings to buy a 3D printer because I was broke from smoking. I woke up the next day still mad and never smoked again. It has been 534 days. I finally got that 3D printer, by the way. It is awesome. Story 133. We made a rule when we bought our first home that we had to smoke outside. The weather was awful and I started to feel sick every time I went out to smoke. It became such a negative experience that I simply stopped. Nicotine gum helped a bit, but it was almost as unpleasant. The worst part was that I had to give up coffee for about 6 months because I couldn't have one without the other on the drive to work. Story 134. I smoked a pack a day for 20 years. I quit cold turkey and had to recommit every day until it no longer felt like quitting. The first 3 months were the hardest. Story 135. I slowly reduced how many I smoked each day until I was down to only one with my morning coffee while using nicotine pouches. I used those for about a year and then switched to nicotine gum. Story 136. I listened to the Alan Carr Easy Way audiobook over 3 days and have not had a single puff since. That was 7.5 years ago. It was the best decision I ever made. It was very easy. Story 137. I quit cold turkey once I was ready. The first couple of weeks were hard, but I used the Quit Smoking app. There is a prompt you can press to have it give you reasons not to have a cigarette, one reason at a time. I found that really helpful. Story 138. After smoking for 30 years, I started to feel sick one day. At first I thought it was the flu. After almost 3 weeks of feeling that way, I went to the doctor. It turned out I had hyperthyroidism. The doctor told me to quit smoking and drinking, eat a healthy diet, and exercise. I did. That was almost 3.5 years ago, and I have not had a cigarette or an alcoholic drink since then. I eat a healthy diet and ride my bicycle 100 miles each week. I have never felt better. It was that or die in a few years. It was an easy choice. Story 139. I was told I have irreversible lung damage caused by smoking or the coronavirus. I was in the hospital for several days. When I got home, I tried to smoke, but it tasted awful. I quit, and it was much easier than I expected. Story 140. After failing to quit several times, I changed my perspective. I treated smoking like a friend I would tell maybe later or see you again, accepting that I might never see them. I felt at peace and was able to let smoking go. Story 141. I went on vacation with a sweet and gorgeous Southern belle. Story 142. I bought hemp cigarettes. It was just the act of doing, I guess. I quit in about 4 months. I had smoked for 20 years. Story 143. I told myself I was too broke and could not buy any nicotine products until I earned a specified amount of money within a year. I am locked in. Story 144. I rewatched Constantine. In the scene where the devil removed lung tumors, I realized I would have the same and quit. Funny fact, I still have cancer, just not in my lungs. Story 145. I pay a secret company that tracks me and my family. If I start smoking again or gain any weight, they will dissuade me. Story 146. My girlfriend at the time broke up with me. She had been asking me to quit for years and I always procrastinated. I would say, yeah, I will do it later, and make up excuses. About 2 weeks later, I realized how pathetic I had been. I switched to ZYN to get nicotine without the smoking sensation, and then quit cold turkey about 3 or 4 weeks later. Story 147. I became pregnant and stopped after taking the test. The nausea during the first trimester made me not want it, and with time I felt I did not need it. Story 148. I got bronchitis, which forced me to take 2 weeks off, and it snowballed from there. I've been clean for 7 years, and I still get awful cravings. Don't smoke, kids. Story 149. When I was young and broke, I smoked and loved energy drinks, but I had to give up one brand because I couldn't afford it. I still drink them. Story 150. I had used a vape and a wax pen before, but I stopped vaping because head rushes made me feel out of breath and unable to breathe, and because I had a bad trip from a wax pen at an amusement park. Story 151. This girl I liked asked me to quit very nicely. I have not touched a cigarette since that day. Story 152. I quit smoking cold turkey. My father smoked and died of a heart attack, and later my sister, in her 40s, also had a heart attack. I figured it was best to stop. Fortunately, my girlfriend, who smoked too, was very supportive. It was tough at first, but I battled through the cravings. Story 153. I was hospitalized for 4 days and never looked back. The doctor gave me patches, but they were ineffective. I would go days without changing them because I would simply forget. The biggest thing I did was chew sunflower seeds. Every time I had a craving, I would pop a handful of seeds into my mouth and spit the shells into a cup. I have not smoked since May 4th, 2017. It also helped that I knew my wife probably would not quit, and I wanted to be a better role model for my son, who was 3 at the time. Story 154. Control your mind. That is the only way to overcome any addiction. Story 155. I did a large amount of cocaine on New Year's Eve and smoked 2.5 packs of Newports in one night. I woke up feeling terrible, decided to quit, and began tapering down day by day. On the 3rd day, I woke with a severe strep throat and was sick for a week. I never went back to smoking. It has been 24 years. I cannot imagine how bad my health would be if I had not quit. Story 156. Patches provided one thing: the ability to win my internal argument. Story 157. I started drinking more water, eating more food, and going out to do activities that reduced my desire to smoke. Story 158. My husband said he would quit drinking if I quit smoking. We argued about it, and I had extra motivation to show him I could do it. I have not smoked for 2 years and 7 months. I tell myself I can smoke whenever I want and still keep the remainder of the pack of Marlboro Lights that I left in my glove box the day I quit. Story 159. I was a 7-year cigarette smoker and then a very heavy nicotine vape user for 10 years. I used willpower and nicotine patches. I asked my wife to support me and told her I would be a little irrational for a few weeks. I slowly weaned myself off nicotine using the patches. The first week was emotionally confusing. Give yourself 1.5 to 2 times as long as the box recommends. Pick a quit date and tell people. If possible, have a spouse or loved one hold you accountable. It is scary, but not as scary as smoking forever. If you want to quit, you can do it. Edited to add, I weaned off using patches for at least 1.5 months, maybe 2. It is better to go slower than faster. Story 160. I got sick and could not inhale anything other than pure oxygen or I would vomit. It lasted for a couple of weeks. I tried to smoke a few times after that, but it brought the nausea back and completely killed my urge to smoke again. Story 161. Quitting cold turkey was the only thing that worked for me. I tried patches and vaping, but both led back to smoking. Story 162. ZYN nicotine pouches contain no tobacco. They are flavored nicotine crystals in a pouch. It was a long, slow battle, but keep at it. I was a 40-year smoker and still miss it, but I will never go back. Story 163. One day it just hit me differently, and I was quite disgusted by the taste. I have been nicotine-free since then. Story 164. The price went from $2.50 a pack to $5 overnight. I tried gum and lozenges and they both made me feel sick, so I ended up quitting cold turkey. It was rough for the first week and got better each week after. I had quit for 10 years, then started again, and finally quit about 12 years ago for good. The second time quitting was easier because I knew what to expect, but it was still difficult and I learned my lesson. I cannot casually use tobacco or nicotine products, not even cigars. Story 165. Read Alan Carr's book. I highly recommend it for changing your perspective from thinking you need the will to withstand the temptation to smoke to seeing that smoking is the dumbest thing possible, so you simply won't bother. Story 166. My partner quit drinking energy drinks and I quit smoking. I took one last breath and threw it away. I smoked for 8 years. It's been around 12 years now, and I still dream about it once in a while. I get very disappointed in myself. Story 167. I finally and genuinely did not want to. Story 168. I met a woman who couldn't stand the smell. 21 years later, no regrets. Story 169. I started using snus, but the nicotine addiction worsened. I quit while on vacation in a place where snus is hard to come by. I deliberately did not bring any with me. Story 170. I had been a regular smoker since I was 14. After years of trying and failing, I weaned myself slowly from at least a pack a day to about half a pack. Eventually, the health insurance I desperately needed became available, but the cost would have been prohibitive if I said I was a current smoker, and lying could have gotten me kicked off and potentially cost my partner her job. When the enrollment date came up, I stopped cold turkey. I haven't had so much as a puff or any other form of nicotine in over 7 years. The longer I've gone, the more pride I take in not breaking my streak, and that's what keeps me going. Full disclosure, I still think about smoking every single day. I had to make major lifestyle changes, and I don't think I could have quit cold turkey without them. The first change was that I couldn't work in a restaurant anymore. I was a career chef, but the stress, pace, and overall environment of the industry were too much for me to handle without nicotine. I had recently become disabled, so this was not really a choice, but I know I could not have lasted in that environment with cigarettes readily available. I would have needed to leave anyway. I also stopped spending time with certain people and stopped doing certain activities for a long time. It wasn't the people or the activities' fault, but they were triggers, and I was conditioned to smoke when I was with them or doing those things. Triggers and stress, plus easy access to cigarettes, were a recipe for relapse. In the end, it felt like quitting much more than just smoking. No regrets, though. Story 171. I quit cold turkey but studied a lot about nicotine withdrawal. Mentally, I tried to understand what was happening physically. This was my second attempt, and so far it is going well after 15 years. Story 172. It took a lot of figuring out, but I did. After I understood the half-life process of nicotine, I knew I needed to take vacation time to isolate and fully detox. It was rough, but once I applied the science, the nicotine addiction was gone, along with the roughly 7,000 other chemicals manufacturers add to cigarettes to keep you addicted. It requires a long, harsh period alone and discomfort. If I needed an oral fix, I used straws. It takes a minimum of 1.5 weeks, preferably 2 weeks. Also, among those chemicals is one that mimics a nicotine craving that lasts about 1 hour after the first week, which is why many people relapse after a week. There is a lot of engineering and science involved to keep you smoking. Reach 2 weeks and you will be clear of nicotine and the other chemicals. Story 173. Quitters Incorporated. Watch the movie Cat's Eye and you will get it. Story 174. I started diving with a self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. I got lost during a dive and was huffing and puffing as I made my way back to the boat. One of them had to go, and it was not moray eels. Story 175. I took Chantix to get over the initial hump. After that, walking away and never looking back was a conscious choice. Story 176. I gradually postponed my morning cigarette. I used to have one as soon as I woke up, no matter what. First I waited until after my shower, then until my commute, then until lunch. Eventually I could get through the day without smoking. Story 177. A lot of it had to do with moving into a completely remodeled brand new apartment. I decided to buy all new furnishings. It was a fresh start. Story 178. I got braces. I was afraid that if I kept smoking while wearing them, when they came off I would have permanent marks from discoloration. I have been smoking for almost 4 years. Story 179. Pneumonia. After I had been unable to smoke for a week, I thought I might as well keep it up. Story 180. Acupuncture. I had been smoking for 40 years, since I was 14. I quit in one day and have not smoked since. They placed small needles in my ears. When I felt a craving, I pushed them deeper. It was not painful. I wore them for 1 month, and that was enough. Story 181. I had a stroke. Doctors, Google, and my friends and family scared me into quitting while I was in the hospital. Story 182. I made myself stop buying cigarettes. When I needed to smoke, I would buy a whole pack, pocket up to 3 cigarettes, and toss the rest in the nearest trash bin. $15 for a pack can feel trivial, but $15 for just a couple of cigarettes feels like you have a problem. If they sold loose cigarettes in this country, I would probably still be smoking. Story 183. I could no longer afford those items, so I stopped buying them. Story 184. I got really sick. I decided not to drink or watch the game, and that was it. I realized smoking was tied to drinking, and drinking was tied to watching my team. My team is terrible right now, so I'm not missing anything. If Manchester United start winning again, I'll be in trouble, though. Story 185. I found a way that is rarely mentioned, and it helped me quit. After trying to quit several times without success, I realized the problem was the burden of promising never to do it again. Instead of telling myself, this is the last time ever, I said, I will try not to smoke again, but if I ever want to have a few on a weekend or at a party, I will. This changed me from smoking a pack a day for years to smoking maybe 5 cigarettes in the first year and about 5 more over the next 5 years. Almost immediately I stopped thinking about it because I knew deep down it would not be a problem if I had one. It is not the same as completely quitting, but it is practically the same and much easier. I had zero trouble doing it. I highly recommend this approach for any addiction. Story 186. I wanted to stop. It was unhealthy and expensive. The kicker was my friend. At the time he was obese. One day he said no to beer and decided no more beer or snacks until he lost weight. I said okay. If you can quit drinking, I can quit smoking. We both did. He lost 35 kilograms over a year, and I have not smoked since. The first 3 weeks were tough, but it worked. Story 187. I made a plan, researched it, and bought patches and lozenges. I only used 3 patches and no lozenges. The key was to finish the last cigarette before bed. Then start the low-level nicotine patches. Make sure there are no other cigarettes left in the home. Be committed to your plan. It has been almost 2 years now. Story 188. I never got addicted. Quit on a whim. I occasionally go back at events or when camping, but it never hooked me. Story 189. Nicotine patches work within 6 to 8 weeks. Follow the instructions in the packet. They remove the need to smoke, which is 90% of the problem. Story 190. I discovered how many of my family members died from emphysema. When I became ill, the coughing was life-changing. Story 191. My bronchitis was so bad that I was coughing up blood. It has been 26 years as of last October. Story 192. A close friend of mine had a heart attack. It opened my eyes. Story 193. I got a job where the closest place to smoke was a 10-minute walk from my desk. The first month was insane. Story 194. As a 2-pack-a-day smoker working the night shift, I knew I could not stop abruptly. I started using snus pouches from Sweden when I could still get them. I now use nicotine pouches. I have not used tobacco products for 2 years and have been cigarette-free for 3 years. Good luck to you. Best decision ever. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.